we're recording this after Keir Starmer's speech and after conference has finished, as we're all sort of nursing our hangovers. And I'm actually trying to literally stay alive because I've had no sleep. Sam, I was just telling you, I wasn't actually boasting because I am actually broken. I did get in at 4:30 on the last morning.
You're so much more of a party animal than me. I was getting in at sensible times. I just can't deal with, being awake past midnight anymore. So
I don't think I can deal with it either.
It's just you're suffering more than me.
And also I'm like a menopausal woman that really is like suffering. I don't know what I was thinking. I think there's this new phrase like a queenager. I think I'm a queenager.
Well, now you're a baroness. You've got to behave more appropriately. You can't be going around getting drunk on conferences.
I know. There's going to be like the next scandal sort of to break. So look, now that conference is over, we're back home, the dust is settled. What did you make of Keir Starmer's speech and conference overall?
I thought the speech was rather sort of like the conference in that it was sort of fine. It sort of got him through. It did the job it was supposed to do. I think, I've read a lot of stuff about how everyone was incredibly gloomy and miserable. I think there was frustration, nervousness about how difficult everything is and how difficult it's going to be, and not much enjoying being yelled at about winter fuel allowance and all of that. But I didn't feel it was gloomy. I think there's still a sort of sense of we've just got to hold our nerve. We've got to get this right, and then that was all sort of there in Starmer's speech. But the big problem with the conference is it was being held 5 weeks before the budget, so there was just a real limit to what anyone could say or announce in terms of policy. So he was kind of very reliant on the argument he was making, I guess, about the kind of politics he wants to do, rather than being able to really yet give a sense of what that looks like concretely to voters. Am I being overly pessimistic and mean about him? Or?
No, I think that's quite a fair assessment. I mean, I was in the hall for it, and I feel like it really did work for him in the hall, because I think the mood at conference had been a wee bit febrile because of those bad headlines and the sense that there was a bit of nervousness. And I feel like particularly the second half of the speech was good. I felt like his section on the riots was very, very strong. I think that was a really good opportunity to sort of show strength and show his values. I think naming them as racist far-right riots was really good. He, I think, showed quite a lot of strength in terms of taking on Farage without naming him and talking about the threat of populism and then linking that to no easy answers. I thought that section was really strong. That got the longest and the loudest standing ovation in the room. And, I feel like, it left delegates in a much better place. It kind of settled and soothed nerves. And I think it made people sort of focus on the concept of service and delivery, which is actually what everybody needs to remember, because I think the headlines have spooked a lot of people, and it was a reminder that there are the bones of some really good ideas, and there are some really good people in the cabinet, and everybody needs to focus on delivery. So I thought it did work for him. But you're right, we're in a bit of a holding pattern until the budget. I think what's interesting, though, as well, Sam, is that a big rumour that has come out of conference is looking ahead to the budget about this thing that we actually talked about, I think, on one of our first ever Power Test episodes with Jim O'Neill, is about speculation that Rachel Reeves will tweak the fiscal rules to allow more borrowing for investment. It's interesting that has run quite hot out of conference.
Yeah, and she's dropped some pretty strong hints, and there's been some pretty strong briefing. Starmer as well made some comments after he left conference. Of course, with these things, it depends on exactly what they're talking about, but it does look like they want to free up quite a lot of money now for investment. And I think having briefed that, it would be quite hard to pull back from doing that. And I guess then they have a choice of where they want to make that investment. Are we talking about schools and hospitals? Are we talking about sort of infrastructure around green energy and roads? I think the Treasury will want more of the latter because it's sort of more growth related. But we do also need the former to get public services functioning again. So even if you sort of say there's going to be a bit more money, there's still going to be a fight over who gets it. But that if they do that, it will give them a positive thing to say at the budget alongside decide some pretty negative things, because they will have to put taxes up a bit. They will have to say not every department's going to get the money it wants. But if they've got a positive story to tell about, we are actually going to invest in whether that's green energy or schools or hospitals or whatever, that will at least give them something positive around what was looking like a pretty bleak budget. So I suspect the budget will actually be a bit better for them than people are realizing, and they've done quite a good job at lowering expectations for that event. But we'll see.
I mean, it feels like that is the thing that lots of Labour people, myself included, are clinging to in terms of the hope for the future. Because if there isn't that wriggle room to do more investing, then I think the mood will continue to be quite bleak. And if they can free up some money, then that, I think, will really revitalise the narrative. I mean, a big thread through Keir Starmer's speech was, building a Britain that belongs to you, and that's where the kind of investment message can come in. But just in terms of the sort of broader feeling from conference, what were you picking up, Sam, in terms of, you've just written this book, Failed State, about how government departments work, how the centre works. You must have been having lots of sort of chats with people on the margin. What are people saying about all of that with this new government?
Yeah, well, I spoke to somebody, one advisor who was listening to the book on audiobook and whilst doing their job, and saying it's kind of quite spooky to have this all completely confirmed while they're trying to do their day job, in terms of sort of what they're trying to get done. I think there is probably more surprise than there should have been about how broken everything is, and I'm not just talking about public services themselves, but also the system, the sort of internal systems. And I think one big story that is very clear, talking to Labour staffers, talking to journalists, is that Number 10 is not functioning properly. We talked a bit about this earlier in the programme, and this is not just about Labour, but also about the civil service. The fact you just do not have any of the key civil service positions in Number 10 filled properly at the moment. Simon Case and Sue Gray really don't get on with each other, and it's all very messy. And there is a sort of slight feeling that Starmer has been a bit too hands-off, not in terms of trying to make every policy decision himself, which Prime Minister shouldn't be doing, but just in terms of trying to sort out his own operation. And he's sort of letting conflicts go, which he should be stamping on now, in order to get things sort of working more coherently. So I think that's going to continue to be a narrative until there's a bit more action that shows that he is getting a bit of a grip on the Number 10 operation.
And while that happens, how much heavy lifting can other departments do, and secretaries of state and ministers do, to get on with things? Or do you need to have a strong functional centre in order to get on with delivery? Because I look at, for example, Ed Miliband's department, which, I'm not just saying because I used to work for Ed Miliband, but it looks like he's got off to quite a good start and he's motoring along.
Departments can do things by themselves, absolutely, especially if they don't require money. If they do require money, they obviously need the Treasury's support. But where you have a problem is exactly the sort of thing that we focused this episode around, this sort of idea of these missions and so on. If you're saying you want your government to be built around cross-departmental missions, and there is a real logic to doing that, you have to have a strong coordinating centre, because otherwise departments will just act on their own and do their own thing and not be cooperating with each other. And that's a sort of bit of the contradiction, I guess, in the approach that Starmer's taken so far. He sort of is on one hand trying to be very delegating to ministers and letting them sort of get on with it and having quite a weak centre. On the other hand, he's saying he wants to have these strong coordinating missions. It doesn't really add up. At some point, he's going to have to decide, actually, am I just going to be sort of chairman of the board and let my departments get on with it, a bit like David Cameron did in a way, or am I going to be trying to drive a different kind of government and a different kind of mission, in which case I'm going to need to take a bit more of a role in sorting out my operation and coordinating between departments. And it feels like they're trying to do both at the moment and haven't really decided how they want to do things. But I guess that's a sort of a function of a bit of naivety, a bit of inexperience that you would expect. I mean, what's your sense from talking to people at conference? Are you sort of sensing frustration about this stuff?
I mean, I think there was kind of two emotions from people I spoke to. There was still, and understandably so, just huge delight and genuine sort of excitement at the fact that Labour has finally won an election. So I think as a sort of journalist, there was quite a kind of doom and gloom narrative. But then when you actually went to sort of speak to, whether, all different people from the Labour movement, whether they were delegates, whether they were local councillors, whether they were mayors, whether they were, new ministers, new MPs, even new advisors, there was a sort of sense of, I can't actually believe we're here in government. And one of the mayors I spoke to was just saying, look, it's going to be really, really interesting to see what this alignment of power can actually deliver, particularly on things like devolution. So I think there's quite a lot of, anticipation and optimism and excitement to see what lies ahead. So it definitely wasn't all doom and gloom at all. But I think there was also an acknowledgement that certainly, these headlines had cast a bit of a cloud over conference. The two stories that were running, the kind of freebie story and then the sort of number 10 dysfunction story. I think people were alive to that. But I think there's also a sort of a feeling which, look, in any new administration, there is bound to be some teething troubles. And that, if this can be a kind of moment that people can learn from and people can get things sorted out, then that will be fine. And also, people were pointing out that when Starmer's operation first came together back in the day, when he first became leader of the Labour Party, people moaned about how dysfunctional it was then. And, it was like, oh, it's just not working. And, he can be quite ruthless in terms of, moving people on and all that sort of thing. And I think there is something about him not to be underestimated. At the beginning, everyone was like, oh, he's not going to he's never going to become prime minister. He's probably not going to be leader of the opposition for that long. Remember, Hartlepool was seen as like a really big disaster. And, he even considered his position after that. So I think there's a little bit of, look, he's only 2 months in, just give him and the team some time and they will kind of, get, it's all so sort of new. I think there was also a sense of, in a way, the election going early was very good for Labour, but in a way, the timing of this conference was quite bad for Labour.
Yeah, I mean, the whole timing has been very difficult. You come in, there's a summer, lots of people go away over August. You've then got a conference before your spending review. It would have been better for them if the election had been earlier or later in a way. Although if it had been left any later, the challenges would have just got worse. But I think you're right about, Starmer has shown ruthlessness in the past, and we kind of need to see a bit of it now, I think. I suspect we might over the next couple of weeks, so we can keep an eye out for that. But yes, I think there's certainly plenty of time. I mean, I think, you remember how many different things happened over the last parliament before you get from one end of it to the other. You never have a parliament where you have sort of one dominant narrative the whole way through. So we will definitely see periods where I think things are going better for the government, periods where things are going worse. That's inevitable. But hopefully, when we're talking this time next year, they will have been able to get their sort of spending review sorted. They'll have got some big announcements out. Things will feel more kind of on the road and progressing towards where we all want to get.
And I think they will be aware, as I said many, many times before, the general election is a long time away. And in a way, this conference speech is probably the one that matters least in many ways. His conference speeches will become more significant as we get closer to general election. Of course, those elections in Scotland, which I keep banging on about, but that is going to be a very important staging post for Labour 2026. And of course, there'll be local elections then. I think there's going to be some more mayoral elections. So that May 2026 is going to be a really, really important, sort of delivery point for Keir Starmer. But as you were saying, Sam, the big thing we're all looking forward to is the budget. That's really going to be a seminal moment for this new Labour government. And I think all things are going to flow from them. And hopefully we'll be able to chat to you more about that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of people sort of messaging saying, when are you coming back? We're not quite sure yet, but we are hoping to be able to come back for a full series at some point.